What is up, everybody? This is Silverspook, and this is the Silverspook stream video about The Last of Us and why we don't need it. The US and The Last of Us. Anyways, the problem with selfish individualism, human nature, or human nature bad stories, and how Western rulers are conditioning their populations for self-annihilation. Oh, sorry. Be quiet, computer. Anyways, so if you have not heard about it, obviously you probably have. I'm going to guess at this point because it's everywhere. The Last of Us is one of the most popular games of the last decade, approximately. It has recently been converted into a show on Apple TV. I guess I'll start with some positives. So just on the movie review front, The Last of Us is like it's a very well, it's a well produced, competently acted, written and filmed show. It's very tight in its editing and its script, especially the beginning. I would say the beginning is the most first like 45 minutes of it is like very, I wouldn't say it's not necessarily like a master class in direction, but it's very sparse. It almost reminds you of Blade Runner because there's a lot of like one word lines. It's like time, eggs, shell, and it's super terse. It's like super well, and then exactly the amount of information that you need for each scene is deployed in each of the shots. So it's very tightly edited and written. So that's just from a purely aesthetic, film buff point of view. It's very well done in that sense. It's of course, Pedro Pascal's in it. He's the Mandalorian, etc., etc. So he's popular, everyone's dystopia daddy right now, apparently. So if you want to watch it just for Pedro Pascal, I mean, you can watch it just for him. I mean, hasn't done anything too cancelable, so that's good for him. He is Chilean with his, and he does have a trans sister that he supports, and it's all good things. So I'm sure the show will continue to have a strong viewership for the foreseeable future. Just for that, he's kind of the Keanu Reeves of the 20 teens. But anyways, everyone else in the show does a good job as far as I can see. Anyways, I'm sure a lot of people will be making videos about this going forward. Because I just basically use the video, I use pop cultural phenomenon shows and games and movies as thumbnails for things that I actually want to talk about. Easy thumbnails, just like it reduces my total work time producing a eye-grabbing, eye-candy graphic clickbait, to basically 5 seconds rather than having to produce images for every video I want to make. Also, it stops when people who don't like who say true things start coming for all of the Voltaires and all of the honest people. When the people who operate the Death Star satellites start culling the non-stormtroopers, then I don't get my streams removed, like Redacted Tonight, Empire Files, countless RT actual journalists. So that's why I do this. I'm waiting for Danny Haifonk to not have a channel anymore, but congratulations to him. Anyways, but back onto the show though. So I do want to front load this because I made an intentionally spicy, I wouldn't say nuclear hot take. I would say, let's say it's like, climate change causing fungal brain infection mushroom head zombie take. It's that's how hot this take is. It's not that hot because I think not everybody's happy with the United States. But I think, I don't know if you know, if you notice, look closely at the title. It's the last of U.S. It's not the last of us. It's the last of the United States, and why we don't need it. Um, but also I do kind of mean, in a certain sense, it is a kind of a double entendre. It is a pun, but I also mean we don't really, not because The Last of Us is not entertaining, not because I want to gatekeep people from enjoying dystopian science fiction. If I did, then I would have to stop people from watching the movie rendition of Neofeud. Speaking of games made into movies, and I want people to watch that when it comes out as a Netflix original series or a silver screen or Apple TV or whatever special. I don't know if and when exactly that will come, but I don't want people to not play Neofeud. It's obviously has dystopian characteristics to it. What I mean by The Last of Us, why we don't need it, has more to do with the, as I kind of explain, as I kind of go through in the sidebar there, the problem is with the selfish individualism. It's not necessarily with even just dystopia per se, right? Just otherwise nobody could write fiction or nonfiction, because living in the United States is living in a shithole country. Ask Vietnamese people like Luna Oi, who have 1,000 times less homelessness, don't have to be worried about being killed for being Asian in the street, and also have a quality street food and fresh veggies everywhere, and not just for a handful of bougie upstart, vegan, re-gentrified Puerto Rican bodegas, where only the wealthiest, hippest of the hipsters can stroll down to their Whole Foods, right? And so when you go back to Vietnam, you're actually not in a dystopia. When Vietnamese and Chinese people come to the United States, they suddenly arrive in a dystopia where the transportation is falling apart, where people are being shot by the police all the time. There's 0 police murders in Vietnam last year, just as one example. This is one place. Cuba, when they come to the United States, all of a sudden they have to pay half of their life savings to not die, right? So factories are reshoring from Germany. I just read Siemens, the United States is actually destroyed its own population so successfully that the Germans, who don't have any gas to run their factories because of U.S. imperialism, are taking their Siemens factories and they're going to put them into the United States, where there are no unionized labor at all. Germany still has some union labor, but that's all being eradicated by the United States. And now the United States is going to produce so the U.S. is the new Bangladesh for itself. It doesn't need to export its slave labor outside, because the dystopia is the United States. So, right. So it's kind of everything as reversed. In that sense. So the dystopia is not, if we were talking to just write your date. I mean, I don't know. Do people write blogs anymore? I don't know. I was just trying to read somebody's blog, but the people are like 60 years old. They're basically 1 foot in the grave. I'm just kidding. I was reading Charles Strauss's blog, but, to write a blog, to write a journal entry is to write dystopian fiction, is what I'm saying. Because the United States and much of the West is already a dystopia. They've also made dystopias all around the world, like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, what they did in Vietnam, but Vietnamese have come out of that. What they did in Korea, the South Koreans are actually not doing very well. Watch Parasite. Or any of the movies made by Bong Joon-ho. Sorry, I forgot his name. The guy who directed Parasite. But anyways, so dystopias are everywhere because Western barbarism is everywhere, and not because human nature. Right. That's one of the arguments I want to kind of make. Is it's not because human nature, but it is because of a manufactured subset of human lifeways and human civilization that has plagued the world, right? That's called, it has many names, but win-lose ways: capitalism, barbarism, imperialism, racism, sexism. Basically, being Aristotelian, actually, because he was pro-slavery, sexism, patriarchy, and benefited from capitalism, in fact, and made maritime bets on Greek ships that were sailing to deliver olive oil and wine to other parts of the Mediterranean. So high-frequency trading algorithms were already, minus the computer technology, there were already credit default swaps in Greece 2,000 years ago. So that's when I talk about Western rulers. I'm talking the whole gambit, and not to say that there haven't been other barbarian in terms of causing mass suffering, death, and destruction and enslavement systems in the world, other than just that region around the Mediterranean and West. But they were the most successful at it, let's say. And today, the United States, as a Western country, as a descendant of the Europeans, is the most nightmarishly successful at propagating that virus of its own culture, right? So it's not necessarily like what the dystopian fiction that comes out of Western countries like the United States, Hollywood, obviously, the dystopian fiction are stories about how this is how everyone is. This is how we all are. This is how humans are. Human nature is bad. The Road, right? Think of The Road. Think of any Zack Snyder movie circa 2003. This movie feels very 2003. It's very naughty. It's very George W. Bush is in charge, and we all have to fear the Middle East and the Muslim hordes. It's very Zack Snyder's remake of Day of the Dead, or Dawn of the Romero zombie movies. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It actually, there's a part of The Last of Us that goes to 2003 specifically, and there's American flags everywhere. Everyone's listening to Nickelback. I don't want to trigger Holly, so I'm not going to sing any of his groaning hyper American Yankee anthems. So I won't do that because I care too much about Holly's emotional post-traumatic West disorder. But that was a time period of extreme, post World Trade Center towers being attacked, right? The fear of Americans, because the problem is America. Not that I don't want anybody to have any war and destruction and suffering happen and befall them, but the United States has been spared most of its wars. It hasn't actually have wars in its homeland, like at the scale of Iraq, Afghanistan, etc., etc. Europe had in its memory World War II. The United States, Pearl Harbor is not located in the United States because Hawaii is under an illegal U.S. occupation. Ask the United Nations High Commissioner on Human Rights. But, annoying things like factual history aside, let's come back to the West where there isn't any. The United States hasn't actually had any actual calamities befall it. It hasn't had, right, 1 million people die in carpet bombings, right? The United States backed far right, Stepan Bandera worshiping Nazi regimes in a coup in 2014. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not doing actual history and truth today. There are some evil people that magically came out of nowhere in Ukraine in 2014, just snapped into existence, right? Like somewhat like springing forth from an Asian dragon's mouth or something. They just came out of China made the Nazis. Obviously, Russia is the Nazi country if we ask the New York Times, the BBC, or any Western media. But the United States didn't suffer tens of thousands of people being shelled because of their ethnicity, like what it did. Or I'm sorry, what happened in eastern Ukraine that has nothing to do with Victoria Nuland, John McCain, and Joseph Biden, all who participated in the support, the funding, and operation of this far right coup. But anyways, I keep on putting true facts into this stream. I got to take that out so that white people watch it. Anyway, so the United States doesn't have it hasn't had any war. It hasn't had any large scale conventional or unconventional or nuclear war. Not that I want nuclear war, but the United States is trying to start one. as fast as possible. And that's part of why they puts out these kind of stories, right? It hasn't suffered that. It doesn't have that memory of having the people, right, actually being shot down, gunned down, hit with artillery shells, hit with javelin missiles. California hasn't been wiped off. Orange County and Orange County and suburbs near George Lucas's house or Michael Bloomberg's house haven't been completely wiped off of the map, right? New York hasn't been nuked, right? It's not a smoldering crater, right? There isn't biological, speaking of zombies, fungal, microbial, mosquito bite, viral infection or otherwise, the United States has visited biological warfare in East Asia, like Korea, right? In the East Asian countries where the United States literally dropped cholera-filled insects to mass kill people and visited chemical warfare. Portland hasn't been hit with chemical warfare. The United States hasn't experienced that level of actual violence. It constantly salivates about it, and then it tells all of its young men to sign up for the military, or now young everyone, to sign up for the military, because now they're mostly going to have robots fight their wars. But now I should take that back. They want young Ukrainians and Germans and Taiwanese and South Koreans to sign up for the U.S. military. I'm sorry, the military that the U.S. operates outside of its jurisdiction via extraterritoriality. So, but anyways, you see what I'm saying, right? So, the human nature bad stories, right? The problem with this, and the problem with the people are just bad, and that's why bad things happen, is because people are bad, and anyone down your street is liable to raid your house, and you should really get a gun. Get 35 guns. Get 85 round ammunition cases. Like, really, buy a lot of AR-15s. Like, a whole lot. Because you're going to need to gun down all of your neighbors, right? I quote the great American thinker. I take that back. I want to quote the great Western thinker, Alex Jones, when he said, "I will eat my neighbor." But that's not really Alex Jones talking. That's Aristotle talking. When he said, let me get his exact quote for you. That's actually Plato, Aristotle, and Thomas Jefferson talking. When Aristotle said, Plato said, "The superior ruling over and having more than the inferior is justice." Remember nature, very important. Nature herself intimates it is just for the better to have more than the worse, the powerful more than the weak, and in many ways she shows, among men as well as among animals, among whole cities and races, justice consists of the superior ruling over and having more than the inferior. Where's my other quote? Here you go. So this is the great Western thinker Aristotle. The male is by nature superior, the female inferior. The one rules, the other ruled. The inferior class should be slaves of the superior. War is a natural art of acquisition against men intended by nature to be governed. So by nature there are barbarians, right? And barbarians means anyone outside of who I am. And those people are violent. And the ones that are better at violence, the ones that are superior, right, are destined to enslave, to conquer, to kill the inferior, right? And so that's a strong claim, to the average Western person. I don't think they don't really recognize how mass propagated through society that is. And it's an appeal to all Western thinkers. They appeal to nature. When they convert to Christianity, when the West converts, right? The Romans basically duplicated the Greeks down to the gods, right? Down to the gods. Zeus became Jupiter, etc., etc. Paul in the Bible basically stole all of Aristotle's writing and converted all of this into religious terms. For the Roman Empire, not preceded, for the Roman Empire that superseded the Greek Empire or came afterwards. And so Paul took all of all of this ideology, which is that the world is full of violence, right? Nature is full of powerful and then not powerful, right? Nature is full of different genders and races, and some of them are better. And the ones that are better have to kill and enslave the other ones, or kill the other ones. If the other ones refuse to follow orders, then they should be killed. And it is their nature to be enslaved, right? And so Paul said, masters obey slaves because that is what Jesus Christ and the Lord God above wants. And then Paul, and that's Christianity, which is European Westernism. Christianity is a anti-imperial occupied colony, not unlike Hawaii is the occupied colony of the United States, right? Illegal occupation. The occupied Jewish peoples in West Asia by the Romans, right, resisted, but that was not what was natural was for what, according to the Romans and the Greeks, what was natural for the Jesus Christ and his fellow Jewish people was to be subjugated as a lesser people, as the Jewish people have been victims of anti-Semitism ever since in the West, right? As the last 2,000 years of Jewish people. And so, I mean, among other people. And then they took they took the resistance, right? The Romans took the Black Lives Matter. The Romans took the Haitian uprising, right, of 2,000 years ago. And then, like Martin Luther King, they turned Jesus into a giant poster and they slapped his face all over their empire. It's called the crucifix. They take the resistance and turn it into their virtue. And now we say, right? And then after that, they say, Jesus Christ and God above asks you, right? You know, nature turns into Jesus. Jesus and God have intimated that it's better for you to, right, submit. Masters, slaves, obey your masters, right? Wives, obey your husbands, right? Superior, rule over the inferior, for God sees that it is good, rather than because nature. So that's the only difference between the right and the nothing has changed. The United States is the same. There's the Jesus right, and then there's the nature left, right? It's just human nature. All the liberals are gonna watch this show. The thing is, the Last of Us, it kind of fuses, it kind of brings the two together, because you have some American flags, you have a lot of guns, you'll have a lot of shooty bang bang. But then you also have this kind of like, you have this, they don't explicitly appeal to God, but they kind of appeal to nature. They appeal to the human nature is to fall apart. But you can put some flags in there. There is some God early on in the beginning. This is the slap fight in the West is whether we should have slavery, sexism, racism, imperialism, and barbarism with a crucifix on it, or whether we should have slavery, racism, sexism, and barbarism with a nature Aristotelian statue on it, right? And appeal to science, right? Appeal to some kind of concept of so-called humanism. But I don't expect the West to ever make any sense. Anyways, I'm way off of my topic. So, but I do want to bring that up because the human nature is bad, right? Goes all the way back to those people who normalize it. Another way to think about it, right? Another way to think about it is Western thought, quote unquote thought. I don't know. Like as I said, you have to. It's more brain titillation than thought. It's just kind of like what makes me feel good today. It's not really thinking, I would say. But Western thought is screwing the world up, right? Filling the world with slaves, filling the world with misogyny, right? Justifying needless wars, kind of like the United States justifying wars in Vietnam, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now nuclear war in Ukraine. Because we're gonna win any. Haven't you read BBC? We're gonna win any second now. If we give our Nazis some more of the healthcare and food money, while the children eat the last packet of ketchup, half of the United States is in near malnutrition or malnourished or in poverty, right? Any second now we're gonna win, right? You got to keep up with the leaders of the Western world. The Chinese and the Vietnamese, the Cubans are not reading that kind of crap. You should remember that. So that's why they're smarter than you. But anyways, the Western thought is screwing the world up, calling it nature, and then using the BS artistry. It's also called English classes. Sometimes they call it oration. We just watched Road to Wellville the other day, so you can sell 15-gallon yogurt enemas for $2,000 a pop to Westerners, right, in the East Coast of the United States by putting a bunch of pretty words around it and calling masturbation the sin of Onan. Just put you put florid words and metaphors everywhere that don't make any sense and don't equate to anything. Westerners will buy that shit up because it makes their brain feel good. It just big words in a row. It's like argument from eloquence. But that's what Plato did, and that's what Aristotle did. They put lots of pretty words in a row, and then people just ate that shit up. But if you disagreed with a handful of Greek men who owned slaves, were racist, supremacists, and beat their wives, right? If you disagree with them, then they just kill you because you weren't natural, right? Because if you resisted the system of the Greco-Roman racist, capitalist, sexist, imperialist situation, right? To be clear, that predated Marx by a long time, so that's why Marx has failed analysis because he doesn't go deep enough. If you disagree with that system, you are not natural. You were like, I don't know, a zombie, right? You had to be shot by a really cool dude with a gun. I mean, a cool white dude. That's non-white dudes don't count as human in the West. Anyways, so you have to. Of course, what is whiteness is a sliding scale depending on how many people they need and what the demographic situation looks like. But the Western thought it's not really about thinking, is what I'm trying to say. It's not really about factual reality, but it is about taking this distorted reality that you've created, right, by not healing from the damage that you've caused in your society, right, and then declaring that as nature, right. It's not natural. This is like this is like taking this is like taking a well, right, pouring gasoline and toxic chemicals into it, right, and then saying, oh, it is natural for water to be poisoned. It is incredibly difficult for it to get clean water. And then while you have the one bucket of clean water, or the one 10-gallon thing of clean water, and say water is so scarce because it is natural for water to be full of gasoline, and then you sell $10 for an ounce of water to all the population, like in Morton Joe, right? Because this is just a natural way of things. That's not natural. That's what the United States did to Native Hawaiian water like mine. Is dump U.S. military jet fuel that was supposed to go into their battle tanks and their aircraft carriers and their F-35s. But now they're dumping it in my water, right? And you know how much the U.S. charges for water in Hawaii? $5 to $10 a gallon. So that's a life experience. That's a lived experience example. But that's just one of many, right? That's not natural for what, because Hawaiians didn't do anything like that for thousands of years. And then in the time in which there was industry in Hawaii, we had 100% renewable hydroelectric powering the city of Honolulu. I'm not even joking about that. So the Western way is to literally screw nature up, dump jet fuel toxins, right? And then socially profligate capitalism, selfish individualism, all these horrible systems, undialectical, brainwashed populations that are not capable of rational thought, that are ahistorical, right? Spread toxins through the world, mental, social, civilizational, environmental, and then call that's nature, right? Hey, Greeks, look, there's slaves everywhere. Because then if you tell the slave is walking down the street, right, in Greece, and they're going, why are there, this seems a little bit wrong. Why is half of the population working for the other half and eating the worst cuts of meat and just being beaten all the time, right? But then Mr. White Greek man will just say, well, you see, this is nature, because in nature, right? Look at the lions, look at the lobsters, like Jordan Peterson. Except all of the animal kingdom, all of the animal world doesn't actually do that. This is just, again, like everything else, Western bullshit that you have to consume in the West. Because if you don't, well, then the Greeks might just kill you or enslave you. The Americans will just make it so you can't make any money and get gainful employment, and then you'll die of starvation. So the West has, the American system and the European system have just have evolved. They have made advancements in ways to be more terrible to people and get away with it. Those are the great advancements of the Western world. But if you are a slave walking through the streets of Greece and going, why? Well, number one, you wouldn't be walking anywhere because you'd be a slave. And who were the slaves? Persians, Asians, and Africans. So if you were just walking through the street, or you're just looking around going, why are there so many slaves? And then there are people that are have own dozens of us, like for example Aristotle, and then have their wives that they mistreat and make them do all the cooking and the cleaning and have no say in the government of the household or anything else, because women are to be women's place is to be silent, and that Jefferson echoes that as well. Women actually said women should not wrinkle their pretty foreheads with politics. He's just echoing his European and Greco-Roman ancestors in the West. And so the slaves going, why are half the population, right, of a particular gender subservient to the other one? Why are all of us basically brown and black, the equivalent of brown and black people, being whipped and doing all this grueling labor for a handful of people? Why is society so dystopian? Like, I mean, now, if you're a white Greek man, or if you're a Greek slave owning native Hellene or Macedonian, right? Then society is great. It's utopian, right? We live in the best possible world, and America is trying to reproduce that for its white, cis, straight, landed aristocrat men. But if you're a Greek slave, it's dystopian. But you're looking around, you're going, why is this so dystopian? Why am I forced to do grueling labor for terrible pay, and I can be killed at any second on the whim of my master? Because that's the case, and that's always been the case. It's the case for black people under U.S. slavery. That was the case for being a black or Asian person under a British colony or a French colony in Indochina or in Vietnam, or being a Taiwanese, indigenous, or Chinese person on Taiwan Island when the Dutch took that over and built the land of milk and honey on the enslavement of Chinese and indigenous people, the Hakka people that are Austronesian on that island. So you know, in all those cases of Western imperial barbarism, if you were the slave looking around, right, or the woman looking around going, why is this society so dystopian, right? You don't have to read The Handmaid's Tale. You could just be born in Greece, but identifying as femme. You just be born in Greece and you'd be in a dystopia, right? And so you'd be looking around and you're asking yourself, why is everything so terrible? And then the master, the white man with capital, will tell you, well, you see, that's because this is what nature has intended. Now, if you're in the post-Constantinople era, this is what God intended. Nature, God. If you're Richard Dawkins, it's nature again, right? If you're George Bush, it's God. But it's the same goddamn story. It's just one of them has more crosses on it. The other one has more Greco-Roman pasty faces on it. So but the story is, this is what is intended. This is what the world is like. This is the universal state of the world. It is dystopian, or it's not. It's dystopian for you, but it's great for me because that's nature. Nature intends for you, right? Nature intends for you. The Greek term is let me get to Aristotle's exact quote for you. So he has this. I've been going over this in several different streams, but just real quick. So here's some of his choice phrases, right? Here, if you want to read more about this, here's the Athenian Constitution. Oop, shit. You can get all of this. If you think I'm making this up, no, this is Western. This is the great Western classics that everyone has to read. And even if you don't read it, you're consuming it, because this is all on the curriculum. While they're banning CRT and African history AP classes across the United States, they are mandating that you consume Plato, Aristotle, Jefferson, American history. It's all based on the same Western thought. Let me come back to this. This is actually kind of nightmarish. It's actually Western education, U.S. public schools and private schools are child abuse, because you're being taught slavery is actually good, even though you don't realize it. And you're justifying it by not accurately telling the history of the United States. Anyways, second from a list of 441 works of classic. Where the hell was it? Okay. Yeah. Let's go to Aristotle. Yeah. So I recommend you read some of his work. I mean, don't read it too much because you might get brain damage. But and you might turn into an American, or a British, or a French, or a Spanish, or a Greco-Roman, and that would be terrible because then you'll be a barbarian. But you should read it critically. Let's see. Politics. Yeah, there you go. So, for that which can foresee by the exercise of his mind is by nature intended to be lord and master. This is Aristotle. That which can with its body give effect to such foresight is a subject, and by nature a slave. Hence, master and slave have the same interest. Now, nature has distinguished between... So basically, slavery is natural and right. Now, nature has distinguished between the female and the slave. But among barbarians, there is no distinction made between women and slaves, because there is no natural ruler among them. They are a community of slaves, male and female. So basically, what Aristotle means is that because there is no natural ruler, right? Because men don't rule over women among barbarians, everyone is a slave, right? There needs to be a natural pecking order, right? There's men, women, slaves, and if that doesn't happen, everyone's a slave. So that's the Jordan Peterson chaos dragon. When women and men are equal, the world is in disarray, the planet's out of alignment. It is meet that Hellenes should rule over barbarians. So it is right that we, the West, should rule over Asians, like the Chinese. And the Russians are mostly in Asia, by the way. So remember, the Russians are Asiatic, and the New York Times and BBC trot images of Xi Jinping dressed like Genghis Khan on a regular basis. They still do. I just watched another article come out of The Economist yesterday with a barbarian shrouded, like giant sword wielding Putin. So this is not at all gone. This is not at all changed. This is a mistake is to believe, well, that's over now. We don't believe such ridiculous things that some peoples deserve to rule the world. No, that's the that's the US and Europe to this very second. Are you kidding me? Anyways, okay, but I've already I talked about that a lot in last. If you want to learn more about that, I got to get to The Last of Us, but I talk more about that in one of the most recent Twitch streams. I'm thinking about doing a stream. Also, what's up, Strin? I'm thinking about doing a video series just about de-Westification and the entire history of all of the forefathers and founding fathers, and all of their ideologies and history from a non-Western. I'm a native Hawaiian and Asian person, so from a non-Western perspective. But anyways, let's come back to The Last of Us, because I don't want to go too far off of that. But importantly, I wanted to talk about the human nature part, right? Human nature, right? In The Last of Us, right? Which is, again, I'm not trying to criticize this show specifically. The show is actually, it's to be honest, I actually like Resident Evil a bit more. But, The Last of Us is, let's just get a little bit. It's a very popular game, but I actually like the Resident Evil show a bit more than this one. But it could be because I played more Resident Evil, or it could be because it's the main character is a black female character. But anyways, The Last of let me see if I can get the synopsis here. I don't want to buy it for PlayStation. Joel, a grizzled survivor of a dangerous post-pandemic world, has slowly lost his sense of morality after the loss of his daughter, and Ellie, a young girl with her own struggle to find a real human connection, are forced together and must travel across the United States in search of a faint hope for the future of humanity. And so Yeah. So, if you played the game, you know a little bit about this. But I mean, a lot of people haven't played this game. Like Holly can't really play this game because Holly has a allergy to Nickelback, early noughties country, and zombies. But anyway, so it's all the worst things because this has Nickelback in it. I'm not even joking. In a hostile post-pandemic world, Joa and Ellie, brought together by desperate circumstances, must rely on each other. So, 20 years after the fungal infection obliterates most of the U.S. population and turned the victims into infested monstrosities, Joel is tasked with escorting Ellie to the Fireflies to help with reverse engineering a cure. I mean, this is just, to be honest about this, when I read the Last of Us plot, and like when I watched some of the Last of Us, not the game, not the show, the Last of Us is just some zombie movie stuff, man. It's just like Resident Evil again. How many Resident Evils are there, by the way? I mean, I to be 100 with you, I will watch a Mila Jovovich freaking Resident Evil any day. They're like, it's campy and goofy and silly, and it's just some zombie bullshit, it's zombies getting their faces shot off, and then there's you've got Mila Jovovich like looking great and then kicking their face off, and then sometimes you have, what's her name, you have other Michelle Rodriguez from Fast and the Furious comes in and helps out, and other people, and and you have under the ground evil corporations. I mean, biological warfare in Asia, like biological warfare in Asia. You know what Resident Evil was called when it was first released in Japan? Biohazard. You know why it's called Biohazard? Because the United States used Asian countries as research locations to conduct biohazardous research, like, I don't know, making spike proteins on cells and on RNA and different contorted strains of SARS viruses designed to target Russian ethnic people or Asian ethnic people. Did you know that? And so Japanese researchers making bioweapons were just like writing dystopian nonfiction and then taking it a little step further. And why is the U.S. making biological? I have a whole video if you want to learn more about that. It's called The Actual Biohazard, actual zombie apocalypse, right? Not Hollywood bullshit written by Israeli neocons like the creator of The Last of Us. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm talking about the actual, if you want to learn about actual real world viral biological warfare that has resulted in mass death, right? I have a video. Why do I always have to verify that it's me for the okay. Let me go to my YouTube channel. Every time I do this, it's like asking me for this. But if you really want to learn about actual biological warfare, right? There is a video that I made that's in my live. Okay. And it's all the way down here. Yeah, Resident Evil and weaponization of disease. The United States has weaponized disease again and again and again and again. Obviously, the first time, one of the first times, not the first time in the West, but the first time the United States or the Anglo-Saxons used it was to bring smallpox in the blankets or otherwise to the United States, give those to indigenous people, and wipe out 70-90% of the population, show up and take over. And then, to be clear, it's not just about germs. It's also about killing women and children and slitting their throats after you wipe out huge swaths of the indigenous population. So biological warfare was also, they attempted to visit biological warfare upon we, the native Hawaiians. I'm going to be able to find this, I know. Yeah. So just as a concrete example, never mind The Last of Us and mushroom fungal head zombies. Never mind that. It was common practice for explorers to capture Indians, take them to Europe, and sell them into slavery because the Europeans were Greco-Roman slave lovers like Aristotle in the so-called democracy, right? So anyway, 220 shillings for an Indian slave. Smallpox blankets were given to Indians. Smallpox was unknown to the continent prior. The Native Americans did not have any natural immunity to disease, so smallpox would effectively wipe out entire villages with very little effort required by the Europeans. From 1615 to 1619, smallpox ran rampant among the Wampanoags. They lost 70% of their population to the epidemic. Massachusetts, again, 70 to 90%. That's why when the Pilgrims arrived, they found well-cleared fields, which they claimed for their own. It was to them the wonderful preparation of the Lord Jesus Christ by his providence. That's the eye of providence on your dollar bill, right? Annuit coeptis is Greco-Roman, also known as Latin, for it approves. It is wonderful preparation of the Lord Jesus Christ by his providence for his people's abode in the Western world. So if the Pilgrims to the United States, right, from the Western Anglo-Saxons, this is the Anglo-Saxons, but the Spanish also came down to South Central America, etc. If the British Pilgrims were atheists, right, what they would say, based on what I've told you, what would they say, right? The wonderful preparation of nature, right, by his providence for his people's abode in the Western world, right? It is natural, right? So it's either nature. It's just natural that all the indigenous people die, and because we're biologically massacring them, right? And not just biologically, and then we slit the throats of women and children and sell their $10 for a baby scalp, $15 for a dead woman, and $25 for a dead male. And so it's not just biological; it's also direct murder, right? And so it is natural that the Last of Us style actual real world massacre with germs and guns and steel, that's natural for that to happen, right? That's just human nature, right? Jared Diamond made a book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. That's like, this is just naturally what happens. Well, I mean, that's what Westerners do. That's what indigenous people didn't do that to each other. The Chinese didn't do that in Hawaii. But what did the U.S. do in Hawaii, by the way? What did they do in Hawaii? Oh, that's right. The United States tried this on Native Hawaiians, but we used the Europeans tried this on Native Hawaiians, but we used contact tracing, lockdowns, and vaccines, and universal healthcare, which we invented, by the way. Did you know that? The world's first universal healthcare the fight was led in Hawaii by Emma Kalani Kamaka Amano, Kaleleo Nalani Naea Rook. She believed that healthcare access was not a privilege, but a national security concern and a right. And the United States, Hawaii actually had free healthcare for all citizens, and there was nothing like that comparable for 100 years. And there actually still isn't anything comparable, because if you are not white, if you're not Western, just like the Greeks, right? If you are Persian or you are Libyan descendant, what does that mean? If you are African in Germany, your healthcare outcomes are abysmal. If you're Muslim in France, I mean, France is having a great general strike, and that's great. That's really great. I'm happy for them. But if you're Muslim in France, you're 15 to 20 times more likely to be in prison. So they're still an imperialist. They're still a Western country, but it benefits a handful of people still. If you're black in Sweden, you're also far more likely to be sick and die. And also, they just say the N-word all over the place in Finland and Sweden, all in the Scandi countries. And also, they're all backing U.S. imperialist war, and they benefit from planetary plunder by having slaves in other... Having slaves 2,000 miles from you is just imperialism. See, the Greeks were not capable of that at the time because they hadn't become as sophisticated as the Romans. They had slaves inside of their household. That's the Romans' innovation was, let's put the slaves all the way out there. Actually, I'll take that back. Alexander had slaves thousands of miles from his household in Bacta, in what's now called India, or on the northwest part of India. So, but Alexander was not as successful as the Caesars in mass enslavement. So, but anyways, okay, so let's keep going though. So, Hawaii had the world's first universal healthcare system, and so when we come to The Last of Us, right? Oh my God, biological warfare. Oh my goodness. Fungal parasite that inserts itself through the bloodstream, creepy crawls into your dendrites and your synapses, and it nibbles on your axons, and it corrupts the web of neurons inside of your Western brain is already corrupted by your K-12 schooling. You know, your belief that America is the greatest thing in the world, that capitalism is the salvation of this earth, and that there is no war in Ba Sing Se. Oh, I'm sorry. There's no war in Afghanistan. There's still a war there, and also you're backing Nazis. Did you know that? But anyways, it doesn't. If a brain mushroom fungus got into a Western head, British, Austrian, French, or American, or Canadian, it might actually help heal some of the damage that's been instilled by reading Aristotle and Jefferson, right? You know what I'm saying? So actually, I think that The Last of Us, I think mushrooms might, like Mario eating a mushroom, it might actually, if you destroyed some of that bullshit in your head, it might actually power you up. You might actually get smarter. That's my prediction. If there was a fungal mushroom that spread throughout the Western world, it might eat some of like that BBC, New York Times, and New York Times bestseller book propaganda. Like whatever Paul Krugman put out this year about how, or Ben Bernanke, we're in the great moderation now, right? If you got a mushroom virus, it could eat some of those cancerous constellations called Western education out of your head, and then you might get smarter. You ever thought about that? I want to maybe I'll write a movie about that one day when I have any kind of funding. But anyways, unfortunately, I'm too base to ever get funded in the West and Western world. Neofeud was rejected by 2 separate game publishers for being too political. Politics is when you say true things in the West, and that's why I can't get published by EA, Activision, Blizzard. I don't know who the publishers are now. Whatever ass clown made The Last of Us. I don't know. I can't get published by that. Maybe Elon Musk will have a great idea and he'll get his game published, right? Because he has great ideas like, people are paid in direct proportion to the complexity of the problems that they solve, right? So the problem that Elon solved was how to lose for $44 billion, right? And destroy your electric cars, social media sites, and how to make it harder for actual spacecraft engineers to engineer spacecrafts. So anyways, and remember, Elon is the pinnacle. He is the crown jewel of the West. Along with Alex Jones. Those are your greatest thinkers. Anyways, so Jordan Peterson, very celebrated individual, very celebrated in the Western world. Very, 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 very bright guy. Very smart. Right? Anyways, is he still alive or is he back in rehab? I can't keep track. So the problem with selfish individualism, human nature, and bad stories. So when you see this narrative that these diseases are going to come and kill Americans, and there's going to be dystopia. Number one, it's counterfactual. The U.S. is already dystopian. You don't need to die from a mushroom brainworm. You don't need to die from bite transmitted body snatchers. You know what I'm saying? You can just die from starvation. You can just die like the 1,200 people that were just shot in the face by the so-called law enforcement officers of the United States. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about mushrooms. You already got COVID-19 and you spread it, right? Individuals, government, business work together to kill 1.2 million people and enrich the most powerful and the wealthiest, right? The descendants of Aristotle got richer and you all got fucked. So you don't need to go to some kind of future dystopia. You already live it. That's one thing. Number two, if there was a viral outbreak, right? What they're saying is there's no solution. I really don't like that actually about The Last of Us. In the very beginning, right, of The Last of Us, in the very beginning, there's a speech, right, where this dude is on the screen talking. It's like 3 white dudes talking to each other. Mistake. Never listen to any of these people. You're already getting infected with brain virus. You're getting infected with brain stupidity, right? When you listen to 3 white dudes on a stage. In the 1960s, let me see if I can get that, And so you're already getting brain damage. This part, you know what I'm saying? And basically, The Last of Us, the original intro series, was much more terrifying and visual. Okay, so in the very beginning, right, Craig Mazin co-created. Yeah, trying to find what the speech. Yeah. One of these elements is a sensational introduction scene in which we are given a historical context from the point of view of some scientists, something that was never part of the original game. And while this scene is already quite disturbing, now it has come to light how it could have been introduction to the series. Even more visual, even more terrifying and visual. So in The Last of Us opening scene, the late 1960s, where two scientists are discussing possible pandemics that could wipe out humanity in the future. Beyond the classic viruses and bacteria, one of the two scientists puts fungi on the table. Hypothesis is that initially laughed at, but little by little, thanks to the scientist's speech, begins to provoke fear among those attending the show. However, the first scene is totally original since it does not appear in the video game. It could have been very different. So anyways, so the thing is that like in this scene, what the scientists are saying, can't get in there. What the scientists are saying in the scene is that there is, if this viral contagion, right, that could come about in the future, one of the scientists is saying it's guaranteed going to come about in the future, right? If this comes about in the future, there is no possible way, right? There is no possible way to stop it. Once the mushroom fungus takes over all of our genius white man brains, right? Because we're just a bunch of geniuses here, aren't we? Right? Like the people that got 1.2 million people killed, and the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Cubans, and a lot of Africa actually saved millions of lives, right? And didn't do that, right? And had 3 years of actually competent COVID policy. And in fact, at this point, even post-lockdown, they have, a tiny fraction after the zero COVID in China of deaths relative to the United States because of their policies, right? But the narrative in this Last of Us intro is, if the virus takes over, there is nothing we can do. There is no cure. There is no possible treatment. There is nothing we can do. The virus will take over. Everyone will get it. We'll all die. We have to let it rip. Like when the virus comes, we're all going to be Sweden about it. When the virus comes, we're all going to be American about it, which means pretend like there's nothing that can be done. That part is actually, I don't like that, because it's kind of like it universalizes, right? It universalizes a Western reality, right? It says everyone is going to do that. It leaves out the fact that, literally there's 200 to 1,000 times less per capita, like everything else. 1,000 times less homelessness, basically zero. 1,000 times less COVID infections in places like Vietnam, Cuba, and China for a long time. Later on, they went up, but they already had vaccines in place. They had procedures in place. They had treatments in place. So far, far, far less people died, and far less people got serious hospitalizations, chronic coughs, and then later triple-demics because of destroyed immune systems. So the narrative is that nothing could be done is part of, it's Western propaganda, right? This is the natural, appeal to nature. Appeal to nature or God. Are you Democrat or Republican? If you're Republican, appeal to God. You're Democrat, appeal to nature. It is nature that right? Jesus Christ is our vaccine. Let us inhale these trillions of particles of my fellow, right? Hydroxychloroquine injecting, Joe Rogan podcast listening, church congregation, right? That's the Holy Roman Empire, right? Mass COVID infection in your church, right? Like all the people that got sick going to their right wing rally. But then the Democrats were just like, well, it's nature that we're all gonna get sick. It's not God. It's just science. It's scientifically proven that we're all gonna get sick. Listen to the CDC that has now turned about face, and they just all of a sudden, science is just saying that now. Nature is just saying we're all gonna get sick and die. So, and I'm not saying that it's like you shouldn't get vaccines, because if the West wanted to be honest, they shouldn't look to the left or the right in their own countries, because they're basically two sides of the same coin, slightly better and slightly worse and distant in different facets of their way they run things. If the West wants to learn anything, they should look east, but they don't. They could look east. They could look into their indigenous people that they're settler colonizing and genociding, right? Like mine. If the West wanted to learn something, they could look global South. Even Africa was doing a lot better in terms of actual total illnesses. But some of that's they're not tracing it. But where they're doing better, it's because they're not doing. They're cooperating with China getting vaccines. They're learning the tracing and testing ways. Because why? Because, well, they're not in a lot of places as polluted with Western brain disease. So, but you know, I'm a little bit off of a topic there. But that I just want, that's a little comment on the viral pathogen and zombie apocalypse dystopias based on viruses normalize the idea that everyone is just gonna get sick and die. And then it's just about individualistic, right? Then it's all about individualistic survival, right? And individualism, which is Westernism, it's about selfish individual Greek people in togas toasting to each other. It's about selfish individual Roman Christians toasting to each other, right? Seeing how much more they can plunder from what was then Gaul. I think they call it France or something now. And they basically, the French just repeated that to the Vietnamese. And the French are toasting in their Versailles going, I wonder how much we selfishly can individually accumulate in our palaces, right? As the Vietnamese suffer and die of starvation, right? So they just repeat that process with the same assholes, right? But it's like, and now when the world falls apart, then it's a bunch of selfish individual dudes always, right? With their guns, right? Hoarding all the medicine and the food for themselves and afraid that everyone else is going to come and get theirs, right? So it's like, if we can lord it over a planet of slaves and destroy nature, we'll do that. If we destroy nature and kill all of our slaves, we'll fight each other with our own guns. But it's the same story, actually. It's actually the same story. Zombie apocalypses. Especially not. I shouldn't. You know, there are some that are different. Like there's a Rebecca Warnhorst has an indigenous story called Trail of Thunder, if I am not mistaken. And this is actually a better. If you want a dystopia, is it Trail of Lightning? Trail of Lightning. I'll be able to find it. Yeah, this is actually an indigenous writer writing. Rebecca Warnhorst is the story centers a Diné woman, and and so this one's not as bad because it's a little more honest, which is obviously for indigenous people like myself, the apocalypse already happened 500 years ago, right? So the indigenous people were already very good at apocalypse, right? People of color around the world, it's like, well, I mean, what how's it gonna get worse? You've already screwed it all up, right? Number one. Number two, you don't survive by being a selfish individual. You survive by perpetuating your culture, coming together as community, right? Doing what we indigenous people have always done. And then obviously you have to like protect, from invasions, but most of the invasions it's not really about a particular virus, or it's not really about your neighbor, right? Just my community is going to invade me. That's always the American fantasy, right? That's the Western fantasies. When I get my gun, I'm going to get 55 fucking, AR-15s and 50 trillion rounds of ammunition. I'm going to build a bunker under my house. I'm going to get grenades and artillery shells that I learned how to use in the U.S. military, doing barbarism around the world like a horrible fucking stormtrooper. And I'm going to use that on my neighbors. I'm going to shoot. If the neighbor comes within 10 feet of me, I'm going to kill my community. This is Ayn Rand wrote that in like the 1950s. She actually wrote the entire Motion Picture Association screen guide for the preservation of American values. I bring that up frequently, but you should read that. So you realize that the dystopian fiction is just a springboard off of anti-communist, white supremacist, American exceptionalist cowboy fiction, which is about strong individuals with guns, white guys with guns. Now it's, guys that are acceptably coded white with guns going around saving things and stopping bad people, right? In a world where human nature governs, and the nature is that strong guys with guns have to protect their women and children from evil non-white guys. That's basically the story of the cowboy fiction. And this Trail of the Dystopia is the same story. You have to protect your Greek household from the evil people coming in. But the indigenous post-apocalypse is I shouldn't say they're all the same, but the story is a very different kind of story, which is like the community has to come together and all the people will work together, right? The people will come together and do mutual aid to pull together so that everybody survives. Because when everybody survives, we all survive. And we have never survived individually, right? Whereas the West is all about fantasizing about how we're going to be the best at violence personally, how we're gonna, right? Because everybody around is just trying to rape everyone they can. Everyone around is just trying to steal everything that they can. Everyone, I mean, that is white dudeness. Yeah, that's Western. That's Western. That is Western life ways and Western culture is be selfish, right? That's capitalism is just the economic manifestation of that. Be right, but that assumes that everyone is like you. But that's just again counterfactual. I mean, again, but we there's no facts and there's no history and there's no honest truth in the West. But I mean, it is counterfactual that most people are like that. It's only again in the same way that if you were in Greece in 300 BC, right, or 350 BC, if you were in Greece looking around at all these slaves, all these brown and black people picking olives, harvesting wine, Roman or Greek, when you look around at all of Aristotle's slaves, right, and all of his neighbors, and you're going, oh my God, is there nothing but this? And then the Greek master's like, that's all there is. So you better choose which slave you're going to work for, right? You choose which one are you going to work for? You're going to work for Aristotle or are you going to work for Plato? Because you're going to work for one of us white guys. That's the only choice you got. That's nature, right? That's the multipolar world is really about going, well, what, it's kind of like, and the counter U.S. narrative, the CRT is not acceptable to be teaching. Black history is not acceptable because Black and Indigenous history is like, what if you don't have to be capitalist, selfish dickhead or be subservient to one, right? Under your capitalist boss employee, who's probably a white guy. What if there is an alternate socialist, communist, indigenous, mutual aid, collectivist option, non-carceral, etc., non-patriarchal, right? Because indigenous people weren't. We had full equality for all genders and also two-spirit amongst Native Hawaiians, Pacific peoples, and Turtle Island, right? What if there's an alternate way that isn't just being a slave to one of these white dickheads, right? Or getting a gun and protecting your personal property, because women are property, for the Israeli neocon writer of this story, The Last of Us. And so, anyways, so the multipolar world is about giving other people options as well. Where the Chinese go, as an entire country, you don't have to just work for that Aristotelian, Greco-Roman, British, French, American IMF loan dealer, or that warmonger, or that puppet that was installed by a U.S.-backed coup in, I don't know, Bolivia, or I don't know, Brazil, or I don't know, Haiti, or I don't know, pick your Asian country. You don't have to be part of that. You can be part of a win-win cooperative global system with non-debt traps and colonial, not just economic, but also cultural, supremacy, right? Where the Europeans look down at Africans while they, give them unpayable, exorbitant, usurious interest rate loans and then don't forgive them and then force austerity measures on all the people, right? So the West only works when you don't have access to the East and the South and the other cardinal directions and indigenous. That's why it's important to remember there's not a great firewall of China, not really. The great firewall is the firewall around the Western head, in the Western mind. It's called all of your school and all of your Western education, Christian and non-Christian, liberal and conservative, doesn't really matter, and left, right? There's not really any real left. You have to exit the West to get to a real left. And so the purpose is to keep you inside of believing that that's what all of human nature is. Nature is powerful and weak. The powerful rule, the man, the white, the Greek, the citizen versus the non-citizen, the superior over the inferior, intellectually superior over the intellectually inferior. And being intellectually superior means being able to speak a lot of English words, prettily. That's basically, and to talk with a low voice so people believe that you're intelligent, or to speak with a British accent, which was constructed by the upper class British to separate themselves from the low British. In fact, as Holly pointed out, the Southern American accent is closer to what the original British accent. They literally construct new accents to separate themselves. Argument from Michael Fassbender's speech. That's what that is, right? It's called argument from eloquence. When people start talking in pretty words, that's why a white guy, when he's losing an argument to a black trans, activist, all of a sudden they start speaking like some kind of Aristotelian white statue boy. You know what I'm saying? The reason why is because when you start speaking that way, you're appealing to the fraudulent conception of intellectual superiority. And so it works when everyone around you believes, when everyone around you is conditioned with the mushroom brain fungus of Western brain virus. Then that works. But if the majority, that's why they're trying to destroy TikTok by framing Elon as if he destroyed it. But it's really, the West is trying to get rid of Twitter, TikTok, and all the social media because there's too many base people ratioing Joseph Biden and New York Times all day long. And that's not conducive to maintaining the Western narrative that the West is superior, that the rules-based international capitalist U.S.-centric order is superior. That's not conducive. So they're just trying to nuke social media because they let the cat out of the bag when they had decentralized, mutual person-to-person, peer-to-peer communication. And that's too bad. And so the only solution now is start nuclear war in Ukraine and Taiwan. And so, anyway. But that's why we shouldn't give into that this is all inevitable, because also that is also not inevitable. That is again, right? That is again appealing to, it is natural that we destroy ourselves, right? It is natural that zombie dystopia, nuclear dystopia, war dystopia, authoritarian regime dystopia, the West is the authoritarian regimes, and all of its puppets, right? That this is the natural process, right? That's climate doomerism. That's, collapse doomerism. It's like, capitalist people, some people that call themselves leftists in Britain and the United States understand capitalist realism is a system of ideological narrative that is forced with in mass upon the public through formal and informal media, books and education, etc. Post in the Margaret Thatcher time, to normalize that this is the only possible system. This is not the best of all possible worlds, but this is the capitalist reality you must